Life is like a practical joke, and if you just realize that, it becomes a whole lot easier to figure out. Not only to figure out, but to recover from, to heal from, if you're going to use the mainstream terminology, because everyone needs to heal these days. And I'm not suggesting that that's something to be taken lightly, but when I say life is like a practical joke, I'm not saying it is a practical joke. I'm not saying it's a joke either. I'm saying that if we understand the simple concept of the practical joke itself and we apply that to life, we'll see life very differently. We'll also feel very differently about the way things played out. So, what do I mean by a practical joke? It's like, when someone plays a practical joke on you, in the moment of them playing that joke on you, you freak out. You might get scared. You might get angry. You might feel flustered. You might go into freeze mode, whatever it is, right? Because that's the immediate impact of what it is that they did. But the immediate impact of what it is that they did forced you or caused you, not forced, caused you to react in a way relative to your beliefs about what was going on, right? Now, those beliefs about what was going on, it happens in a split second. It's instantaneous. It's instinctive that it happens, right? That's what a sense of self is all about. It's an instantaneous, instinctive kind of sense of being in that moment. You can't stop to consider it and pause and contemplate and everything and then choose your response, because by that time it's going to be too late. And if what was going on is what you thought was going on, you'll be exposed to harm, right? So, in the moment of someone playing the practical joke on you, that's when you react relative to what you think it is. So if they come at you and you think someone's trying to beat you up or attack you, you respond aggressively or you respond out of fear. If someone drops a water balloon on you or something, it leaves you startled and you just go crazy and you want to know who's being so ridiculous with you. And those are the kinds of reactions that we have. But the moment you discover that it's someone who you are okay with, someone who's in your personal circle, and you realize that they were just joking with you, they were just messing with you, then that anger, that frustration, that horror, that fear, all of that just dissipates immediately and turns into humor, turns into laughter, or turns into a kind of giddy, nervous response, because you still like bracing yourself for the emotions that are washing over you, but at the same time you also realize consciously that you don't need to react to it. You don't need to react to the intensity of what you thought was going on. And that's what I'm talking about, is that when we have someone play a practical joke on us and we're okay with that person, we don't have a problem with who they are, we don't have an assumption or belief that they're trying to make us look stupid or they're trying to humiliate us. Notice that's all the intent and the motive we insert into why we think someone is doing something towards us, right? So when we don't have reason to believe that that's what they're trying to do, or we don't have a problem with someone just playing a joke like that, because by default we don't see that as diminishing our stature or trying to make us look ridiculous or weak or whatever it is, right? Those are all the beliefs before the moment. Because of that, when we realize it was a practical joke, we're at ease. We can laugh about it. We have a story to tell. Or we have something that we want to jokingly get back at them about. Or something along those lines, right? And the only thing that changed was what we realized was going on versus what we thought was going on. This is critical. This is that absolutely fundamental shift in perspective that changes how we feel and what we think we need to do about it. So I'll say it again. It's when we realize that what we thought was going on was not what was going on. It was actually a practical joke. It wasn't a real threat. When we have that realization, that's when suddenly the impact of that fear, that horror, that trepidation, whatever it is that we're feeling that we thought was happening, all of that dissipates, and it suddenly isn't trauma for us anymore. It's not a traumatic experience. It's not something that is danger or fearful. It's now suddenly something that we take in our stride. And we choose then consciously what we want to do about it, whether we want to get even, are we going to try and pull the same joke on them, or okay, now it's my turn, or whatever the case is. That's something we choose consciously. So if you understand just that, you'll realize that healing is not about methods and exercises and tools and releasing stuff from your body and all of that nonsense. It's not about that. It's about getting a more informed perspective, on what happened. Because that's what happens with the practical joke, right? Is that after you experience the initial impact of it, your perspective is more informed when you see information and evidence and behavior that confirms that they weren't trying to harm you or make you look stupid. They were just having fun with you. And it's when you have enough information to believe they were just having fun with you, that's when you change how you feel about what they did. Now, if it's the same person always doing that to you only in front of others so that they can get an audience, now your belief about why they're playing that practical joke changes. So even though you still know it's a practical joke, you don't appreciate the fact that they're always targeting you. Because now it's starting to seem malicious. It's starting to seem deliberate. It's starting to seem like they are trying to look cool or be fun or be the life of the party at your expense. And when you believe that to be true, that's when the way you feel about it and the way you respond to it will change. So then, if someone that you're generally okay with plays a practical joke on you the first time, cool, you laugh, whatever. Second time, yeah, you laugh, not as much as before, but it's like, seriously, dude, stop it now. Third time, it's like, hey, I told you to stop it. Fourth time, you're not going to want to speak again. You're going to want to give them a reason to take you seriously. That's life. We try our best to be effective at letting others know what is important to us, what it is that we feel about something, or why it is that we don't like something. And if they don't take us seriously, that seems as if they are not respecting us. Meanwhile, that person in that practical joke scenario could be so enamored, so I can't think of a different word for this. Enamored. They could feel so emboldened or good about the fact that they're getting this attention, or everyone else thinks it's funny, so why you have a problem with it, or whatever it is. They lose themselves to the moment because them getting that attention is more important to them than how you feel about it. Because democracy, right? They're going with what the general group feels. So if the general group is okay with it and they're all laughing about it and they all think it's okay and it's just clean fun and all of that, then in that case, because most people think that way, automatically you're not allowed to take offense relative to that social structure. So if you're not allowed to take offense, but you feel offended, that's what oppression feels like. And then when you feel oppressed, now you feel excluded from that village, that social structure. That's your village. You feel excluded from that. So now you have to prove a point to them. You're either going to cut ties and walk away and find another village somewhere else, or if you can't do that, if it's people that are intrinsic to your life, blood ties, siblings, extended family, whatever it is, and you can't simply just walk away, or you don't want to walk away because the overall relationship is important to you, then you start acting out to get them to realize that you're not happy. Because talking didn't solve it. Explaining how you felt about it didn't make a difference. The only thing that kept happening was them telling you, you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't behave like that. That's part of the fun, you being a spoil sport, or you being a party pooper, or whatever it is. And that then isolates you, right? Or you'll feel isolated because of it. Now, the reason that you feel isolated because of it is because the focus is on you complying with what the group thinks rather than the group trying to understand why you feel that way. Again, that's how life works. If people keep telling us you must, and they don't care about why it is that we can't or we don't want to, then we feel diminished. And that's how our self-worth takes a beating, if we are not grounded in what is important to us and what's happening in that moment. Because if I'm connected with what's actually playing out, then I'll realize that all of them are distracted. They're all kind of insensitive in this situation. They're not necessarily insensitive humans, period. But in this situation, they just don't get it. Because to them, they kind of like whimsical or frivolous in this way, generally amongst themselves. So for me to try to get them to behave differently for one person who takes exception to it, it's not going to happen, right? Especially with everyone thinking that democracy is the savior of everything. Democracy is just the prevalence of the most popular opinion, not the most informed opinion. But anyway, this is not about politics. Politics actually reflects our human state. So, when we find ourselves in such a situation, that's when emotional duress sets in, because we want to be part of the group. We don't want to comply with what the group is asking, because that means we have to suppress our emotions. We don't understand why it is that we don't have a different response, or don't understand. We probably just don't consider a different response to the person who's a practical joker. And as a result of that, we then feel as if we're a victim, right? Because I don't know what to do. I told you I don't like this. You keep doing it. Everyone else seems to encourage you to do it. That means you all must be against me. Meanwhile, if I'm always going to give a reaction to that, then the person who loves to get a reaction will know where to go to get that reaction, if that reaction is going to make them look cool, or it's going to make them feel good, or it's going to make them feel significant, or it's going to prove a point, whatever it is. I become a soft target, right? And that's how I then start allowing them to press my buttons. And what I keep telling people is, if someone is pressing your buttons and making you angry, then my question to you is, who put that button there for them to press it? Who said, here's a button to provoke me, come press it? You did. And if you don't realize that you're doing that your triggers and your annoyances and that are because of how you feel about things, not because of what someone is doing, you'll always need people to treat you differently before you'll feel okay. And as I just demonstrated, people are not always aware, mindful, sensitive, in touch with what's happening to the people around them. So group dynamics especially will dictate that the majority opinion in the group is what's going to say whether you are being reasonable or not in wanting them to change. So the only way to then respond to a situation like that is, like I said, you either exit, or if you can't exit, you don't want to exit, you then have to deal with it. And how you deal with it then is to find another way to sensitize them to what is a problem for you. The other thing you could also do is you could highlight how it is that it might seem unfair to you, because you don't have a problem with practical jokes, but why must it always be on me? Why doesn't that person play a practical joke on this person or that person or the other person? Is it because they're scared of them? Is it because they respect them more than they respect me? Because that's what plays out, right? Am I the least significant one in the group? That's why you're always picking on me or always treating me as if I don't matter. Those are the dynamics that affect our interpersonal relationships. But if we're not focused on that, we just respond to the way we feel about it. And because I feel this way, my feelings must be honored and respected, and you must bend over backwards to accommodate my feelings. Yeah, that's not going to work. That's not how life works. That's not how the world works. People all have their own priorities in life to have, and those priorities of theirs and their challenges and everything else is weighing them down in their own way, and you are coming along and adding to that by saying that they must tiptoe around how you feel about something. You're just asking for too much, because now someone is going to be oppressed. Because now if the other person has good reason from their perspective not to change the way they feel about it, or not to put in that extra effort to be super sensitive about you and how you feel about something, or they just don't have the capacity, right? By you taking offense and insisting that they're not respecting you because it's not an emotionally safe space and all of that, you're taking how you feel about yourself and you're making it someone else's accountability, someone else's responsibility. But by the same token, you're not taking on the accountability for how they feel about it. And that's where the hypocrisy of this, the double standard, comes in. Is that the person who doesn't own how they feel about something and what they choose to do about it, the person who doesn't own that, they're effectively asking others to own it for them, because I can't help how I feel, this is just who I am, and you people need to be more sensitive and more accommodating and more inclusive and all of that. And as a principle, that's not a problem, right? But it's just when it goes too far. But the problem is, in return, you will feel strongly about in that same situation. If I feel as if this is unfair, you guys are picking on me, or I don't think this is a very sensitive thing to do, I'm literally imposing my view on everyone else in the same way I'm objecting to them imposing their view on me. So how can you tell me I must laugh about it when I'm telling you I don't like it? So then from their side, how can you tell us that we mustn't laugh about it just because you've got a problem with it? See the problem? If everyone's going to go around with their buttons wide open for someone to come along and press it, and then they hold the person pressing it accountable for pressing it, who takes accountability for the fact that that button is there in the first place? So until we see things differently, until we get a different perspective of this whole thing, and we look at it from that perspective, we start seeing it from that perspective, we start seeing that, okay, my reality is my reality, my way of thinking about this is my way of thinking about this, my value system is my value system, my past experiences that might have made me more sensitive to this issue is my past experiences. They don't know that. They don't share that. So the best thing I can do is help them to understand why it is important to me, or understand why it is that something that I feel so sensitive about, no one else seems to feel equally sensitive about it. It's not about you're not honoring me and you, and this is my illness or my mental handicap or my trauma or whatever. It's a matter of just taking ownership of how you feel about things and why. And if you don't know why, then it's for you to put in the time and the effort and the introspection, the reflection, meditation, if you want to even do that. Whatever you need to do, you need to be curious enough to want to understand why is it that this is affecting me the way it does. It's like you don't hold someone accountable in that situation with the practical joke if that someone is someone that you want to be close to. So you don't have a problem with them. They're someone that you're really interested in, or you're intrigued by, or it's someone that you really love or you really care for, and they're close to you, and you share that bond and there's a trust between you, and suddenly the same behavior you don't have a problem with because you trust them. So that's the issue. It's the trust. The sense of betrayal, the sense of abandonment, the sense of rejection, how we feel, how we interpret their behavior or their motives. That's the difference between whether we will allow one person to get away with it versus the other. And if we don't own that, we're going to hold total strangers responsible for how it is that we feel about them not being sensitive about something that we feel strongly about. So when I say life is like a practical joke, I'm saying everything, your childhood experiences, your past breakups, your past good experiences, whatever it is, if you just understand what it was that was a contributing factor towards that beyond your experience of it. So there's other contributing factors around it, right? How other people feel, how they show up, what their reasons were for even being there in the first place, or showing up in that way, or behaving in that way. If you understand why it is that they weren't capable of doing it differently, or being more supportive, or being more sensitive, or being more willing to trust, or all of that. If you don't understand why, the only thing you're left with is believing that they did it deliberately towards you. And then how that affects you because you didn't ever think that they would betray that trust you placed in them and all of that. And remember, trust is not about I promise you this and I made a commitment to that. No. The moment you engage with someone, there's a social contract that's being established. And that social contract is where the trust comes in. It's unspoken. There's an expectation, a legitimate, reasonable expectation that if I'm treating you well, you have no reason to treat me badly. If I'm being honest with you, you have no reason to lie to me, etc. And because of that intrinsic trust that exists in relationships, all relationships, not just significant others, whether it's at work, whether it's in a professional setting, in a business, in someone else's shop, or total stranger that you encounter on the street who's looking for directions, even in there's a certain trust that is established. You trust them to appreciate your effort, to want to assist them to find their way. You don't expect them to scream and shout at you. So that trust, that intrinsic trust that we have about how the world works and what we need or expect from people. That's there by default. And if you don't realize it's there by default, when they behave in a way that's unexpected, that's unpleasant, you're automatically going to feel, it's an emotional experience, as if they betrayed that trust. And that's why we then end up getting angry so easily, is because we feel betrayed, we feel let down, we feel as if someone is taking advantage of us. But we don't realize that they may be completely unaware of the impact that they have on us, because they're so busy mulling over and internalizing their demons and their struggles and their gripes about life. And when you get into that space where you don't want to take accountability for your triggers, for your buttons that you allow people to push, you're doing exactly the same thing. You are focusing on how you feel about it and how others must accept, appreciate, and respect how you feel about it. And you don't realize what impact you're having on them at that point. And that's why self-pity, this whole self-absorbed approach to what we need and how we need the world to see us, and choosing our pronouns and our identities and all of those nonsense things, all of that redirects attention to what everyone must honor about us. And if they do, then we'll honor it about them. It's a transaction. When we find it difficult to accept ourselves, we force others to accept the version of ourselves that we are most comfortable to be defined by. If you don't own who you are, if you don't own how you feel about life, or why it is that you feel that way, or why it is that you're struggling, because it's okay to struggle. That's the thing. It's okay to struggle. You don't have to judge yourself for struggling. You don't have to judge yourself for making repeated mistakes. What you have to do is you have to want to understand. You have to want to figure out why it is that you just can't seem to get this right. And that's the difference between comparison and judgment versus aspiration. Aspiration is I want to be a certain way. I want to be better. I want to achieve a certain level of competence or proficiency or a certain quality of life. I want to, not I have to, or I deserve it. It's that you want to. And when you want to do something, because you just committed to experiencing that value that you want to create, then each time you keep failing at it, you try to figure it out, because it's aspirational. You don't see the failure as rejection or as judgment or as ignorance or incompetence. You just see it as there's something I'm still not getting about this. When you do that, you're not defined by your failures or by the shortcomings that you encounter or by your blind spots. You just see that as input, as feedback, as, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I know I keep getting this wrong, but I promise you I'm trying to figure it out. That's where you should be. But if you don't hold yourself to that standard, you're going to make others responsible for creating space for you to be able to get it wrong. And you don't care what impact it has on them, because you're the one that's struggling, so they must understand. But what about the impact you have on them? And that's the problem, right? We don't understand what impact we have on others. Similar to the flip side of that practical joke. The joker doesn't realize what impact they have. That's why they only see whether the reaction is something that people will agree with or not, or will have fun with or not. But if they don't know what place they hold in that person's life, like for example, say there's partners, spouses, and the husband is always playing practical jokes on the wife in front of his family. If he doesn't realize what impact he has on his wife because he's playing that practical joke, not someone else in the family, that has more impact. And then she'll feel humiliated. She'll feel as if he's trying to make her look stupid in front of his whole family, and it's him with his family against her kind of thing, and vice versa. Same thing happens in return. So women are not innocent. So I'm just saying men because I'm a man, so it's an easier point of reference. But the point is that if you don't realize what impact you have on someone, you're going to keep judging them for whether or not they're reasonable in what they think or how they feel about what you did, not about the fact that you did it. Too many people don't consider that. And majority of the problems in relationships is because we don't realize what impact we have. And the impact we have is not just what we do. It's about all of the reverence and all of the prestige and the importance and all of that the other person places on the role that we are fulfilling in their life, the space we occupy in their life. And this is probably the biggest reason for failures in marriage these days, is that they see each other as role players. They don't realize that relative to my ideals about what a good life would look like with my partner, that's what my partner is actually occupying that space in for me, and vice versa. So the fact that they exist in that role, that I've allowed them into my life to fulfill that role in my life, that already has a massive impact, right? But if they don't realize what impact that has, and they just assume that it's always about whether they're good enough or not, they're going to do something innocent that might diminish how we feel or our standing for them, like maybe not consulting us on certain things that has mutual impact, or that we both should be growing together or building together or something like that. Then that feels as if that person, my person, is actually dismissing me, disregarding me. They reducing my significance in their space. And then we start fighting. Because fighting, anger, is a demand for significance. I won't allow you to diminish me because I am your partner. So I have rights. I deserve to be consulted. I deserve to be considered. I deserve to be included. All of those things are true. You deserve all of that. But just deserving it and emphasizing the fact that you deserve it doesn't help in any way to solve the problem of why it is that it's not happening. And that's where we go wrong. Because if we don't realize why it's happening, or we don't try to consider why it's happening, we'll stop at the point of assumption in believing that it's deliberate. I told you about it, you're still doing it, so that means you must want to do it. This must be intentional. But we don't realize what demons they've got. We don't realize how it is that what we're asking of them might provoke their vulnerabilities or their demons. So that's their buttons that we're pushing. And again, I can hold them accountable for those buttons and make them responsible for the incorrect assumptions they're making. And that's perfectly on the level, it's true. But that's not what makes a good relationship. A good relationship is about wanting to understand each other, not having to be understood. And that's where a lot of relationships fall short, is that there isn't a curiosity to want to understand. There's only a tolerance to give the other person enough time to comply with what is expected of them, to show up in the way that we think they should show up, without complaining about it, without having an issue about it, to prioritize us the way we see prioritization, not to prioritize us relative to what it is that they are capable of or what capacity they've got, relative to all the other demands that they've got. Because there's no person in this world whose only demand that they have to fulfill is their partner. Everyone's got other demands, either extended family, friends, social circles, employees, professional groups, whatever it is. And if not all of those things, then there's other personal things that just doesn't make sense to want to share with your partner, because some things are inside job, right? It's things that we need to do for ourselves. We just need to decompress. We just need to unwind. We need our own creative outlet. We need our own hobby, whatever it is. And when we don't realize that there's that dimension to the relationship, it becomes consuming. It becomes overwhelming and overbearing and almost like nagging that everything has to be centered around us. No. You have to have a healthy space between the two of you as well. And you have to have a healthy space between you and others around you as well. And it must go from both sides. So the next time you're struggling to figure something out, consider that the reason you're struggling to figure it out, the reason why it's just not changing, is because there are contributing factors that you haven't considered, or you don't even know you should consider, because you don't know what you don't know. That's why curiosity is so important. That's why our need to want to understand is more important than our confidence in knowing what we know. That's how it is that you strike a balance and you establish harmony and you create space as a natural consequence rather than as a deliberate act. Relationships have become far too deliberate. It lacks spontaneity, it lacks fluidity, it lacks a rhythm that it's supposed to develop on its own between the two people in the relationship, not because that's the way a good relationship is supposed to look. Life is like a practical joke. The sooner you realize that and you consider that, the sooner you'll understand how it is that healing is not a process. Healing is literally moments of realization. Think about it this way. Final thought. When you have a realization of something, say for example, you are convinced that someone was inconsiderate towards you because they just didn't think that you were worth their time, or they deliberately ignored what you made them aware of was important to you, right? So that has an impact on you, and that, because it was a defining moment from a really important person in your life, somehow it convinced you that I shouldn't expect people to have more time for me or to be interested in what I'm interested in. So that's your takeaway from it. So your takeaway from that becomes your belief that this is who I am, this is my place in this world, this is what I can expect from people, and that's what's going to put up my defenses and my boundaries and my guards and my methods and my all of these things, right? So you then go through life living with that belief. Don't expect, just do what is the right thing for you to do, because that's who you want to be, and you don't expect people to want to show up for you. Done. So you go through life doing this. It weighs you down. And 10 years or 15 years later, or maybe even 20 years later or more, through some random conversation, you discover that that person that treated you that way, at the time they were going through some really, really difficult experiences. Maybe they were even so depressed or so anxious about something, or so stressed about something that you had no idea about, that you didn't realize they didn't have the capacity to create that space or to pay attention to what it is that you kept telling them was important to you. They were distracted, literally. But they didn't appear distracted because they tried to be proper. They tried to acknowledge and respond and commit and promise and all of those things. And that's what it is that convinced you that it must be deliberate. So now, 20 years later, you discover that, okay, I didn't know you were going through all of that. What happens then? That belief you took from that experience about I'm not important, if you internalize this realization, if you connect with it meaningfully to say that it wasn't that I wasn't important, it's that they had something going on and I was actually distracted. That's why I didn't notice that they had something else going on. Or I just didn't know. There was no way for me to know because they hid it so well. Whatever the case is. The point is, if by this point, 20 years later, you realize that, so it wasn't because I wasn't enough. Every one of your experiences that were informed by that belief that you're not enough, every relationship, everything that you assume to be true about people's motives towards you because you interpreted it within that frame of reference that you're not enough. That's why you see here again. All of these people are treating me the same way as that person treated me, so it must be true. All of those assumptions you made suddenly reconciles in the back of your mind. Subconsciously, you go through a reconciliation to say that if that belief was not true in the first place, everything that it convinced me about life is also not true. And that's how suddenly you wake up one morning and you just realize that what used to trigger you yesterday doesn't trigger you today. Or what it is that previously used to be a gripe of yours, today isn't a gripe. Or why you felt so strongly about something yesterday, today it's just like, it's okay, if it doesn't happen, we move on. That's because of a moment of realization. It's not because you went through some trauma release therapy, or you went through some, what's this new one, some vagal therapy and some body stress release, or all of these interventionist strategies. It's not because of that. It's because consciously you had a realization that said that what you thought was happening is actually not what happened. And what you realize actually happened allows you to reconcile how you feel about it, and automatically that then takes you forward in life with less. So all the questions that are unanswered questions, the struggles, the need for justice and all of that we packed away in the back of our mind, all that mental clutter, the why, all of that, the moment that realization hits, everything associated with that realization is offloaded. It's no longer something I need to deal with. And that's why you suddenly feel this weight lifted. That's how simple it is to find relief in life. But we've complicated it to the point where everyone thinks that they need to get some sort of exhaustive set of rules and guidelines and therapies and all sorts of things before they can just be able to feel okay about something. It isn't. Life is like a practical joke. The moment you realize what was happening rather than what you thought happened, immediately you feel differently about it. Take care.